asked to do a historical program, we do a lot of research in order to make sure that what you are hearing is correct. It's not stories that we have just made up. So you're welcome to take a look at any of those. Take the bibliography if you want, because it lists the books, it lists internet sources that we used in order to come up with the activities that you are participating in this evening. Now for this part of the program, I'd like to introduce my grandson, Michael Abigail, because he is the technical genius that helps me when I do these programs. And this is his friend, Brittany Folan, who has helped me set up all of these materials this evening. And so we're going to go ahead with the third part of our program tonight. When I first met John, I was only 15 and he was 24 years old. He came to my parents' house with his friend, Richard Cranch. The two of them were both lawyers, and Richard was courting my sister Mary. When the two of them left, Mary and I giggled together because we thought John talked way too much. I discovered that he wasn't very impressed with me either, because right then he was seeing my very popular cousin, Hannah Quincy. When Mary and Richard got married, John stopped coming for a while. But then he came back again, and he told me it was because he wanted to borrow some books from my father's library. One of the first books that we chose to discuss together at Fireside Chats was a religious book, because both of us were very religious people. My father was the minister in Weymouth, so I was expected to be at church all day on Sunday. But John was there all day as well. We were both descended from Puritans, and this is what Puritans did. They really used religion in order to give them a set of morals and in order to give them comfort in times of trouble. So the very first book that we discussed was Paradise Lost by John Milton. And this is a book where the devil tempts Eve in the Garden of Eden. Next, we dove into some Shakespeare books, and we also read books about by Alexander Pope. He had many poems, a lot of which were in an English glade that looked like this. When I was 17, we became more serious in our relationship. I think the reason that John was drawn to me was because I wouldn't always agree with him like all the other girls he met. If he said something and I had an opinion about it, I was bound and determined to express that opinion. My parents always said I had a stubborn streak. Some things that attracted me to John were not things that necessarily made him popular as a politician. He was always honest, sometimes brutally so. He didn't dance, he didn't flirt, he didn't flatter any of the other women that he met, and he didn't drink, nor did he swear with the men. John was not always available for fireside chats. He was riding the circuit like other young lawyers that were trying to drum up a clientele. And so we had to write letters to one another. I would address his as Mr. John Adams at first, but then it kind of blended into dear friend. And he would address me as Miss Adorable. When my mother found out that we were thinking about getting married, she was upset because we already had one lawyer in the family. And besides, anybody who had graduated from Harvard, that was respectable, became a minister, not a lawyer. However, she found out that John's ancestors included Priscilla Mullins and John Alden from the Mayflower, so she decided it was okay for us to get married after all. And we were married in the same parlor where we had had so many fireside chats. I wore a soft wool white dress, and John wore a dark blue jacket with a satin waistcoat that his mother had embroidered with gold thread to look like wheat. My father officiated, and when the ceremony was over, we had a reception that included punch. And when the last cup of punch was gone, all of our friends gathered around the doorway to wave goodbye while we got on the same horse and rode to our new home, where John had inherited. His boyhood home was only about 300 yards away from this home. And one of the first things that we did was put away wedding gifts. My parents had given us a grandfather clock, and we put that in the parlor. And my friends had given us a bed warmer. And what you did with that is put hot coals from the fire into it, and then you slipped it in between your sheets. And then when you're ready to go to bed, you had a nice warm bed to crawl into. John worked very hard on our farm, as well as in building a law clientele, and I spent time in the kitchen using this beehive oven. I worked in the vegetable garden, and I started fireside chats in our own home this time. We would talk about Demosthenes and Cicero and Voltaire, French philosopher, and also John Locke, British philosopher. And John used those books and some books on European government in order to form his own thoughts about government, which he published. He thought that in order to have an ideal government, you should have two bodies of legislature so that one wouldn't be just ridiculous about things that it would come up with. It could be balanced by the other body of legislature. And then you should have an executive branch and a judicial branch. He wrote that in 1776 when the Declaration of Independence was being formed. And then he expanded on that in 1786 when the Constitution was actually being written. Life married to John was definitely not easy. We were separated so often. He would go off still writing the law circuit, and he would take along a book called Don Quixote because he liked the way that this fictional character just challenged the rough and tumble life. He was very much like this himself. And then he was elected to both the First Continental Congress and the Second Continental Congress. And while he was in Philadelphia, he wrote to me that he attended the Christ Church very often, and he heard this hymn. John liked Philadelphia because we were a very frugal family, but we had one extravagance, and that was books. There were 30 bookstores in Philadelphia, and he went to every single one of them. He even had a standing order with a London bookseller to send him every book of good reputation about law and government.